broadcasting live from the Business Radio X studios in Houston, Texas. It's time for Houston Business Radio. Now, here's your host.
Hello, Houston. Trisha Stetzel here, bringing you another episode of Houston Business Radio. Today's guest is Eric Grafstrom, founder and CEO of Exit Guide, an online platform that helps small business owners get their companies ready to sell. Eric began his career at broadcast.com before moving to Yahoo and has since served as an executive for dozens of early stage tech companies in Silicon Valley. With Exit Guide, he's bringing that expertise to Main Street, giving small business owners the tools and guidance they need to plan for successful exit, from understanding market dynamics to avoiding costly mistakes. Eric's mission is to make sure owners are prepared to capture the value they build when it's time to move on. Eric, welcome to the show.
Great to be here, Trisha. Excited for the conversation.
Yeah, I'm a long time coming. I think it's taken us a little while to get here. I'm glad. Yeah. And we also have someone in common. I'm just going to shout out to Chris Gay.
Ah, yes.
I'm sure he'll listen.
That's right. That's right.
All right, Eric, tell us a little bit more about you and how you found your way into this business.
You know, I've had a long career in entrepreneurship. It actually started, speaking of Chris Gay, who I met when we were freshmen in college. He would have witnessed one of my first ventures, which is I was selling T-shirts and made enough money to buy a car in college, and didn't think about that as the first step in an entrepreneurial journey at the time. But that's kind of what happened. And so graduated, worked in politics, whole nother story. Met a guy in Dallas that after the campaign that said, I'm working at this new company, and when all my friends were going off to MBA programs and law school and jobs with salaries and stability, I made the decision that it would be wise to try to sell webcasting when people did not have sound cards and speakers in 1996. So,
okay.
Yeah. ADHD does carry through adulthood. Just if anybody's like, do you outgrow it? Would have been a wise question to ask, but it worked out. And, from there, it just kind of led me through this career of starting and building and growing companies. And most of the time it does not work out, and sometimes it does. But through that, I kind of evolved, and I was taking a lot of these executive roles. And what I realized was, when you look at, the US market, I mean, small business, Main Street businesses are massive. It's about 40% of our GDP. And, as a tech entrepreneur, I noticed that this trend, which we'll talk about more, of people who are going to eventually need to retire and get out of these businesses, most of them are just simply not going to get served because they can't afford or access people, M&A advisors, bankers, lawyers, things of that nature. So how can we create an online service that allows them to do most, and maybe in some cases all, of the work that maybe a broker or someone else may do? Now, we're not out to replace brokers. We're not out to replace business advisors. We are there to serve that end of the market that they just simply, the unit economics just don't make sense for them to help out. So we're there for the very long tail of small Main Street business owners who need to figure this out.
I love that. That's fantastic. And you've had, entrepreneurship comes in so many different packages, and selling T-shirts, that's one way we get there, right? And we just can't help ourselves. Yeah. I think I've been called a serial entrepreneur somewhere in my background. So I totally get it. Absolutely. You talk about the trend of people buying what some would call boring businesses. So what's driving that movement? And what do you see in the market dynamics right now?
What's driving the movement is demographics. I kind of started on this journey a couple of years ago, and what I've observed is, it's a natural trend. I'm not going to say it's healthy or unhealthy, but it seems to have reached or is reaching a fervor pitch where you notice some influencers are coming in and saying, okay, buy my course, and here's a seminar and things like that. And some of it's good. A lot of it is maybe not worth the money and the time. And so what you have, though, is when I really kind of look at this, and I think this is a bit of a myth when people think about this. So 90% of small businesses in the US are worth less than $2 million. So most of them are really small. The people who have businesses that are worth 5, 10, 15, $20 million, they are considered small businesses. They can afford to get the help when the time comes. Someone who will help them package it, present it, engage a buyer, move through due diligence, and close the deal. But again, when you look at it, the businesses, about 9%, they're really small. They're 300,000, 600,000, maybe $1.2 million, $1.5 million. So how do we educate and empower these people? And I like to say, look, we have tools, we have a dashboard. We do this in a way that is very technology driven, kind of like a LegalZoom or TurboTax. But how do we do this in a way that gives them, comfort and confidence? And so the market is not quite as rich and as deep what people think of it. They're, just the fantasy of, some 72-year-old guy sitting in a warehouse with Post-it notes and sticky paper, and he just has no idea that it's just throwing off cash flow. And if he just digitized it, I mean, I do get people who want to ask about that. And I'm like, look, that may have happened 15, 20 years ago, but in this day and age, with self-funded searchers, search funds, private equity, and others, there's so many people that are trying to kind of move into this space, and largely because of what they're seeking, they're all competing for that same for 5 to 8% of the market. So, I've taken a kind of a counterintuitive approach, which is I want to help the really, really small guy, but I'm not looking to build a service-based company. I'm looking to build kind of LegalZoom for business exits.
Okay. Yeah, I like that. So I did use the words boring business. I want to make sure that we don't offend anybody.
Boring businesses are great. Look, I will say with confidence and conviction as a total Silicon Valley nerd insider, I spent 20 plus years in that. It's not as cool as everybody thinks. And, would I rather go join some hotshot venture-backed business in Palo Alto, or, sell the yellow paint that goes on the roads that everybody has to have? Trisha, give me the yellow paint business all day, every day, and twice on Sunday. So they're great businesses. It's stuff we need.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. Absolutely true. Well, and it's all relative when we're talking about boring businesses. What's boring to you may not be boring to me or boring to somebody else, right? So who knows? I have a business walking dogs, and some people might say you must be crazy. It was my first business. It's 16 years old, and I still continue to love that industry. Might be boring to others, not to me.
Dogs and experts. How can you go wrong?
I know, right?
Yeah,
2/3 of every household has a pet, so why not? Okay. So, loving this conversation. I had no idea, and I'm in the business coaching space, that 90% of our businesses are really so much smaller than I thought they were. So can we talk a little bit about beginning with the end in mind? I know we're here to talk about exit planning, but oftentimes our business owners, when they get into business, hey, I'm going to go sell t-shirts, they never think about what is 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road. So let's talk about that. What are your thoughts on begin with the end in mind?
Yeah, there's two things that tend to happen, and some of this is a longtime entrepreneur who's coached other entrepreneurs, and so one is most of these businesses start or they get involved because they're passionate about the thing, or they're trained at it. I'm trained as a plumber. I'm how to run restaurants, whatever it may be. As a business grows, the thing they don't always think about and find, in my experience, it kind of hits that maybe $1 to $2 million mark is, wait a minute, I'm no longer doing the thing that I started out doing. I'm now managing people. I'm doing all these other things and whatever it may be. So that's surprise number one. Surprise number two is, look, what I love about what Exit Guide's mission is, they're like, well, who's your target market? I'm like 100% of small business owners are going to exit. Father Time remains undefeated. So the question is whether you're going to do anything about it. But everyone has to go do this. And so, when I look at the market, if you do a tech startup, you're thinking about the liquidity event. You want to bring investors. You want to get a 10x multiple. There's all those pressures that are there. But, when you start a small business, usually it's, hey, look, this is what I'm good at. It starts to grow and it just kind of seems to happen. And then you wake up and you're like, okay, do I have a business that's sellable? And that's kind of the linchpin for why we exist. Failure rate for a small business owner who tries to do this on their own is over 80%.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're going to have a flood of these coming onto the market, that's just simply unacceptable. That's an economic issue for our country. And so what we want to do is we want to be able to get in there and, at a minimum, someone is starting to think about it and ask some basic questions. When do you want to exit? Do you have a business that's sellable? Those are two questions that you should ask yourself and maybe get some input on. And, when you look at that, you got to get an objective view, which is, people aren't necessarily in a small Main Street business looking at it the way they would with a venture-backed startup.
Right.
And, it's not forward-looking opportunity of, things where I might be able to 10X. It's incremental increases in the business. And so you got to have some basics in place for someone to be able to look at the business and not view it as a, project that needs a whole lot of investment and elbow grease, but it's something that they can optimize and scale.
Right. So two great questions to start with, right? Am I sellable, or can I be sellable, and when do I want to sell? Right? How far down the road? So really great things to think about as you're getting into business. So can we take a little bit deeper dive into what are the steps I should take in order to be prepared for that?
Yeah. And this kind of, falls under this umbrella of what a lot of people like to call owner dependency. And so if you are entrenched in the business, that's great. You're working hard. It's very admirable. And it doesn't mean you need to be completely and totally hands off. But if, your relationships with customers, with vendors or partners or people in the community, and a lot of times I see this when people have their name attached to the business. Again, nothing wrong with it. But if you're thinking ahead, you realize that if somebody wants to buy this business, they're going to want to run it and know that you leaving isn't going to basically cause the business to crater. And so the thing that to really start to ask yourself about, is this sellable, starts with, okay, how dependent am I, or how dependent is the business on my involvement? From there, it's really starting to kind of say, okay, have I created some of the documentation? Have I put systems in place? Do I have protocols? We don't need a big employee handbook. Look, I've failed spectacularly as a corporate executive in very constrained environments. Shocking to anybody watching this, I'm sure. But it's the business can't be in your head, and so some of this has to kind of get down. Which is, Trisha's the person who runs all of our marketing. I know some of the metrics and things like that, but she's got a great handle on this. And if I leave, she's going to not only be there, but she's going to rise to the occasion. She's an invaluable resource. So it's a little bit of systems, it's a little bit of documentation and process, and it's a little bit of, trying to basically be honest with yourself about how dependent the business is on you showing up every day just to simply function.
Oh, that's so yes, and yes. So I'm thinking about, for those owners that are sitting out there who can't step away and take a vacation, you need to start working on that right now. If you don't have systems, if everything that you're doing is in your head, you got to get it out of your head. So when you can take a vacation, you're on your way, right?
You are. If you can't take a vacation from your business, you can't sell your business. Bottom line.
Okay. I like that. It makes it so darn simple. So we're about halfway through, Eric, and I am sure that people want to connect with you already. So what is the best way for folks to reach out and connect with you to have a conversation?
Sure. It's Eric, ERIC, at exitguide.com. So it's exit and guide, just one word. And I'm generally pretty darn good about responding to emails. I'm on the social medias and all that other stuff. You can find me on LinkedIn. And all that good stuff. But Eric at Exit Guide's the easiest way.
Cool. Fantastic. Thanks, Eric, for that. Let's dive into Exit Guide. I know you're on a mission to go out there and help these businesses that are 2 million or less, that are ready to get themselves ready to sell. So let's talk more about Exit Guide and how that tool is helping these business owners get where they need to go to exit their business.
So really, it's just kind of a dashboard, and the dashboard allows somebody to log in they're paying a monthly fee, and it's walking them through steps. And what are the steps? Well, the steps involve writing, uploading, and inputting. And so if we had a $20 million business and I was the broker, I'd have, some 27-year-old analyst in the background who'd be chasing these things down and writing this stuff up and showing it to the business owner. We're just putting that into the owner's hands. So it starts with just kind of the basic information about your business. What's the entity type? When did it start? How long's it been around? Tell me about your involvement in the community. Just so someone says, okay, now I understand the business. 2 is, writing down, why is this a good business to buy? And, it can't be, well, it's just a good, these are things that sometimes you think in your head you have an answer, but if you have to write more than 4 or 5 sentences, it becomes a bit of a struggle. So it's, really spending some time and thinking about that. So organizing the story and the narrative of your business is step 1. Step 2 is, what is this worth? Okay, we use a market-based valuation methodology. If you're bigger, you can use discounted cash flow, you can use other things. But for our businesses, we're just kind of trying to basically use something that's relatively straightforward. And so that means people are going to start uploading things like P&L statements and balance sheet. And then the third step is, okay, someone's going to say, this sounds interesting because we've created a package for you. But then the question becomes, okay, then what? So if they start to lean in and say, I'd like to learn more, that kicks off what is known as the due diligence process. And 50% of deals fall apart during due diligence. And much of this is preventable. One, time kills deals. So if you don't have things and someone says, they get your prospectus, they look at it, they want to engage, you sign an NDA. And if they're waiting, 2, 3, 4 weeks for you to, generate your financials because you're out of town and then your bookkeeper's busy and all these other things, someone who's looking at buying your business is probably looking at buying other businesses. And if it's taking you considerable time to kind of just get them some basic information they feel like you should have on hand, it's probably going to affect not only the deal momentum of whether it's going to close or not. So, what we want to do is the dashboard also kind of says, okay, here's the things you need to upload. Here's whatever, other information. Some of that gets packaged into, how to present your business, but then some of it is more confidential information. And you're simply clicking and sharing access from the work you've done. We're kind of guiding someone through creating what in the M&A world is known as a data room, but we're not saying you need to create a data room because that's just gobbledygook and doesn't necessarily mean anything. If they're following their steps, they should actually have created that data room. Click share, and it's going to answer most of the questions that are going to come up during due diligence.
Okay. So I know that there's some business owners listening out there that don't know their numbers. They're afraid of the numbers. They've been burying their head in the sand for a really long time. All they know is how much money's in the bank and can they pay their bills. So what would you say to those business owners that are just running from month to month right now?
This is really, really hard. And what I would say is you don't have to know everything, but you got to know something. As an entrepreneur, and I was talking with an entrepreneur last night, I said, look, too often I see business owners or startup founders and they say, okay, I know I need marketing. I went and hired somebody from marketing and she's just doing what she's doing. And when you dig into, have you set goals? Are you creating a cadence where you're checking in and you're measuring their performance? Oftentimes the answer is no. And so most bookkeepers and accountants actually are pretty nice people who are happy to educate you, but they're not going to proactively add. These are not salespeople and marketers. They're more reserved. But get a P&L statement, get a balance sheet. If you can't figure it out, find a friend or ask your bookkeeper for an hour of their time to help walk you through it, and do it a couple of times. Just start with some of the basic. Now, we're not going to ask an owner to kind of do a deep level financial analysis, but if you don't know your numbers, again, if you don't know your numbers, you're not going to sell your business. So what's the downside of not doing this? Shutting your doors. What's the upside of doing this? You might actually be able to converse with somebody and potentially sell your business. So it's kind of up to you as to what path you want to take.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So I've done my due diligence, my due diligence. I've gone and I've filled out the paperwork. I'm getting ready and I think I'm going to go sell my business and I want way more for it because I put all this blood, sweat, and tears into my business. Yeah. Let's talk about that.
Valuation. The best analogy I draw for people, and sometimes I've had owners that they're like, well, it's worth this because it could be so much more. And I said, well, if I put my house on the market, I can't be 50% above every house in the neighborhood. I mean, I can stick the sign in the yard, but I'm not going to get any bites because people are all going to ask, like, what's inside, like gold bricks or like, cold fusion, like what's happening inside that house.
Yeah.
So you can pick any number you want. The reality is are you picking a number that's, in line with the market? And so that's the first piece of this, but also you got to have a payback period. And if someone's saying, well, my payback period for this thing is 15 years, that ain't going to fly. So what's driving that price is not what you want for it, but what someone's willing to pay for it. And what someone's willing to pay for it is going to be based on, okay, how does this compare to some other businesses that I'm looking at? Mm-hmm. And do I think that there's room in the business for maybe to maybe increase revenue and margins, that I can have a reasonable payback period? And in 3 years, for example, I own 100% of the business and it's all gravy. But if someone is coming in and you're at a price where it's a 5, 8, 10 year payback period, it's going to be, I'm not going to say it's impossible, but you will need some help from the Lord and probably other factors to make that happen. I'm not sure how it would work. The best advice I could do is just pray. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it's hard, when you get into, and I'm going to make reference to a book, you bake pies and you love pies and you make pies and then you decide to go into business making pies and you don't get to make the pies anymore because you're running the business and someone else has to make the pies, but you can't sell the business because everyone's so dependent on you to give them the recipe and the vendor, all the things, right? Yeah. It's hard as a business owner to really step away and put on that shield that says, okay, I know I love my business. I put in all the blood, sweat, and tears here, but I need to really take a look at it from a buyer's perspective, 100%. Not from an owner's perspective.
Yeah. So, and as entrepreneurs, this is maybe it sounds a little bit of a tough love statement, but I'm like, it's what we signed on for. Mm-hmm. Right. And it's a hard thing. It's easier advice to dispense than it is to accept for yourself. But people are like, do you know what I've put into this? I'm like, I mean, I do, and I can appreciate that, but I'm not going to say a buyer doesn't care, but they're going to be like, I respect that, but I'm not giving you an extra $300,000 just because you feel like you deserve it from a emotional standpoint. It's just not there.
Yeah, we have to separate the emotion from the facts, and that's really what this is 100%. About. Yep. So, Eric, tell me, so there are some people out there right now. They're like, okay, I'm ready to sell, but I'm not sure where to start. Mm-hmm. What would you tell them?
You can go to exitguide.com or email me, eric@exitguide.com. We're there for that. But the things that you can go do, step one is, get your financial statements, get a P&L statement, get a balance sheet, and learn. If you're not conversant in it, that's step one. Like, everything is gated if you're not able to kind of have a sense of it. The other is start to think about when and who a potential buyer would be. The worst time to sell is when you absolutely have to sell due to life circumstances or the business has had a downturn, whatever it may be. Okay. So, if you're thinking about this and planning for it as something that you're just going to simply make a business decision, then that business decision is when the business is probably doing quite well and running at its peak, which you're going to say, well, wait a minute, why would I sell the business if it's making me a lot of money? Well, nobody wants to buy the business when it's not making money. So, we got to get to that point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. And so being comfortable with the tools that you have out there and the instructions and guiding them through the process. So you guys go send Eric an email, eric@exitguide.com, or even visit the website for more information. So last question for you as we wrap up today. For those people that are listening that don't yet have plans, or they haven't even been thinking about selling their business, what is some practical advice that you would give them to start preparing today for when that time comes?
What the first thing that I would do is I would review the financials and start to get conversant in that. The second thing that I would do is I would, whether it's a friend or maybe somebody in the business community or a business coach such as yourself, but I would ask if you could get some time, whether you are getting an hour of someone's time at no cost or whether you're paying a professional, for 2 or 3 hours. What I would want someone to do is to basically do an assessment of the readiness of my business. And, what you need is you need an honest, objective view. Looking at financial statements will generate a objective valuation on the business. You may or may not like it, but it's objective. But, really what you want to do is start with, how will other people look at my business? And if you get some tough answers to that, you can either use that to lose hope, or you can say, okay, great. I don't need to sell this business until at least, 3 years from now, somewhere between 3 and 5 years. I now have time to start saying, okay, what do I need to do? And, so if your business isn't sellable today, then let's get you on a pathway of working with someone like yourself, who's a coach or just somebody who can say, okay, what are we trying to get to? And it's invaluable. I know I'm preaching to the choir here. It's invaluable if you walk into a business coach and say, my goal is to take my valuation from $450,000 today to $800,000. And in order for me to do that, I just need a plan and I need help and I need some guidance on how to get there. But now I know what I'm targeting. Well, then someone like yourself can come in and start to kind of say, okay, let's look at profit margin. Let's look at systems. Let's look at things that we can do to reduce your operating expenses. That just becomes that kind of first stepping stone. So don't worry about posting it. Don't worry about selling it. Worry about making it sellable.
Love that. And thanks for dropping those little cookies out there for those of us who are in the business of helping them actually meet their goals, right? And maybe even creating goals. Because oftentimes we get into business, and I know we talked about this at the beginning, but we don't think about when it's time to sell. But nobody wants to just drop their business in a hole and walk away from it. We never get into business to do that. We want to leave a legacy. We want to sell it. We're not going to be in this business forever because time is not on your side when it comes to being around forever, right?
Yeah.
This has been so much fun, Eric.
Absolutely. Same here.
Tell people one more time the best way to reach you and
Eric at exitguide.com. It's Eric with a C. Don't worry about Grafstrom. For the very small percent of your listeners who may be Swedish, it's easy. Everybody else, don't worry about it. So it's Eric at exitguide.com, and reach out and reach out to Trisha, Chris Gay. There's plenty of great business coaches that are out there that will work with you and say, hey, look, I know you want to exit someday. Maybe you're not ready to kind of even start preparing your business. Maybe this is 4 or 5 years out, but we need to get the business sellable. So reach out to me, and I'm always happy to direct you to people if we're not in a position to help you, but love to hear from people.
Fantastic. Eric, thank you so much for being with me today. By the way, for those of you who do need to look him up and want to connect with him on LinkedIn, his last name is spelled Grafstrom. So that you can find him on LinkedIn, or you guys, it's so much easier just to go to exitguide.com. And by the way, as usual, I will put all of these links in the show notes. So if you're sitting at your computer, all you have to do is point and click. If you're in the car, wait till you get home. Just
please do.
Point and click while you're in the car.
That's right. I don't need that responsibility.
Yeah,
thank you,
exactly.
Tricia. It was great to be with you.
I appreciate your time today. That's all the time we have for today. If you found value in this conversation that I had with Eric, please share it with a fellow entrepreneur, veteran, or Houston leader ready to grow. Be sure to follow, rate, and review the show. It helps us reach more bold business minds just like yours. And your business, your leadership, and your legacy are built one intentional step at a time. So stay inspired, stay focused, and keep building the business and the life you deserve.
Thank you.